Russia's seizure of the Chernobyl and Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plants has posed a serious threat to nuclear security. The war has had a huge impact on the economies of both Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine's GDP is expected to fall by 30.4% in 2022, with the International Monetary Fund predicting a further decline of between 10% and 35%. Despite this, Ukraine's economy grew by 5.3% in 2023. The war has caused a humanitarian crisis, with the UN estimating that 30% of Ukraine's population could fall into poverty, and another 62% are at risk of poverty. In Russia, GDP in 2022 contracted by 2.1%, but in 2023 it grew by 3.6%. The G7 imposed a price cap on Russian oil, and many countries imposed an embargo on Russian oil. Russia, to finance the war, introduced tax increases and also used preferential loans to finance the war effort, which was expected to cost about $250 billion by June 2024. In terms of peace negotiations, there were initially talks between Russia and Ukraine, but they were suspended, with Ukraine announcing that it would not negotiate until Russia withdrew from occupied territories. Putin has signaled a willingness to reach a ceasefire, but his proposals have been rejected by Ukraine, which fears they may be a PR stunt, giving Russia time to rebuild its military. Russian President Vladimir Putin has made recognition of Russian sovereignty over the annexed territories a condition for starting peace talks with Ukraine. In early 2025, Ukraine's terms in peace talks included the withdrawal of Russian troops, the prosecution of Russian leaders for war crimes, and security guarantees for Ukraine. Russia, in turn, is demanding the retention of all occupied territories, the return of provinces it claims to control but not fully under its control, and an end to Ukraine's plans to join NATO. Many Western analysts have noted that allowing Russia to keep its conquered lands would reward the aggressor and punish the victim and set a dangerous precedent. They predict that it could allow Russia to rearm and continue its imperialist expansionist policies toward other neighbors, and encourage other regimes to take similar actions. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky compared this to Hitler's actions, who claimed that if he gets part of Czechoslovakia, it will be over. Leo Litra of the European Council on Foreign Relations noted that allowing Russia to annex Crimea in 2014 did not stop further Russian aggression. Public opinion polls indicate that most Ukrainians oppose giving up any part of the country in exchange for peace. Orysia Letsevic of Chatham House emphasizes that calls to make Ukraine neutral, which would remove Russia's incentive to attack, ignore the fact that Ukraine was already neutral when it was first attacked in 2014. In 2025, after the start of Donald Trump's second term, there was a significant change in the United States' position. On February 12, the new U.S. Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, said that seeking to restore Ukraine's pre-2014 borders was unrealistic and that trying to reclaim all of the territory would only prolong the war and cause further suffering. He stressed that Ukraine must have strong security guarantees but ruled out Ukraine's NATO membership as part of a peace deal. Hegseth also added that no U.S. troops would be sent as peacekeepers. That same day, Trump announced that he had a very productive phone call with Putin and agreed to immediately begin negotiations between our teams. Trump also spoke with Zelensky, who stated, "Together with the United States, we are mapping out the next steps to deter Russian aggression and ensure a lasting, credible peace." Ukraine and its European allies have expressed concern over Trump's unilateral opening of negotiations with Putin and alleged concessions to Russia. Zelensky said Ukraine would not accept a deal concluded without its participation, and Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha added, "Nothing can be discussed about Ukraine without Ukraine." EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said that Europe must have a central role in the negotiations and that any deal without Ukraine or the EU would fail. She called it a concession before talks began. Kallas added that the EU would continue to support Ukraine if it rejected the deal agreed behind its back. The UK, France, Germany, Italy, Poland and Spain issued a joint statement reaffirming their support for Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. They said that Ukraine and Europe must be part of any negotiations and that Ukraine must be provided with strong security guarantees. John Bolton, Trump's former national security advisor in his first term, said that Trump effectively surrendered to Putin before negotiations even began. The Kremlin, in turn, expressed admiration for Trump's stance, comparing it with the approach of his predecessor, Joe Biden. The next day, Hegseth appeared to backtrack, stating at a press conference that everything is on the table for negotiations. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance indicated that the U.S. could use military coercion if Russia did not negotiate in good faith. In May 2024, Vance and Trump's special envoy Keith Kellogg said that continuing arms deliveries to Ukraine and creating a heavily fortified demilitarized zone would ensure that Russia would not attack again. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has drawn widespread international condemnation. In March 2022 and February 2023, 141 UN countries demanded the withdrawal of Russian troops, and sanctions have had a major impact on Russia's economy, forcing it to redirect its oil, gas, and coal exports. More than 70 countries, including the EU, have provided humanitarian aid to Ukraine, and some 50 countries have provided military aid. The sanctions have included a ban on Russian aircraft flying in EU airspace and restrictions on Russian media and banks. Many countries, particularly in the global south, have shown sympathy or support for Russia, partly because of distrust of the US. Protests and demonstrations have been held around the world, and Russia has imposed penalties for publishing false information about the war. According to a 2023 report, 31% of people live in countries that support Russia, 30.7% in neutral countries, and 36.2% in countries that oppose Russia. Several countries have designated Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism, and Iceland has closed its embassy in Russia. The invasion prompted Ukraine, Finland, and Sweden to apply for NATO membership, with Finland and Sweden becoming members in 2023 and 2024. The film 20 Days in Mariupol won an Oscar for Best Documentary in 2024. So, what next? Could this conflict end sooner than we expect, or are we just entering its most brutal phase? History teaches us that wars can surprise us, like the war in Afghanistan, which was supposed to last a few months but lasted decades. Will it be the same here? Think about it, Ukraine already has Western equipment, support from allies, and great determination. But Russia is not giving up either. The Kremlin still has resources, new strategies, and, most importantly, time. Who will win in this war of attrition? Or maybe the real question is, what happens if neither side can prevail? What if we face another frozen front, a new Iron Curtain, and a world more divided than ever? This is not the end of the story. This is just the beginning of something bigger. Something that could affect the future of Europe, and perhaps the entire world. If you want to know what happens next, follow our channel, more materials coming soon. And if you've made it this far, it means that the topic really interests you. Leave a sub, like, and write in the comments how you think this conflict will end. Thanks for watching and see you soon.